Hello and welcome to the CircuitPython Weekly meeting for February 1st, 2021. My name is Scott and I work on CircuitPython for Adafruit. CircuitPython is a beginner-friendly version of Python designed for really low-cost, inexpensive computers called microcontrollers. They can run as low as like $5 for a board with that. This is our I should say Adafruit is a sponsor of many of us who work on CircuitPython. So if you'd like to support Adafruit, please go to adafruit.com and support them there. This is our meeting that we run on the Adafruit Discord server. You can join the Discord server by going to the URL adafru.it/discord. We're there all week, and then this meeting happens normally on Mondays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern on the Discord server. So check that out. If you would like to speak in the meeting, we welcome folks, but we have set it up so that you need to be a part of the CircuitPythonistas role. So if you'd like to speak in the meeting and haven't before, just make sure that you have the CircuitPythonistas role. You can ask myself or one of the other moderators to add you to that, and that will give you there. Like I said, this is on Mondays, but occasionally the meeting does get moved if there is a U.S. holiday on Mondays. So if you want to keep track of that, there is a calendar available that we try to keep updated that you can subscribe to there. Check the note stock for that. Speaking of the note stock, we do record this meeting, both the text channel of CircuitPython and the audio in the voice channel. So be aware of that going forwards. The note stock has time codes so that you can skip through the meeting. This meeting does tend to run between 60 and 90 minutes, so it can be kind of long. But I'll take time codes as we go along so that you can skim over what happened in the meeting if you're not able to make it. The recording gets posted to Adafruit's YouTube channel, youtube.com/Adafruit, and it also gets posted, the audio of that gets posted to podcast feeds as well. So if that's your jam, check that out. If you are the voice channel and just listening and don't want to speak up or anything so that we can skip you, let us know that you're lurking, like a number of folks already have. And also, it helps us out to make sure that in the note stock you're marked as lurking as well. So this meeting is held in 5 parts. The first is community news. I'll just go over some of the happenings in the CircuitPython, MicroPython, and Python land there. The second part is the state of CircuitPython libraries in Blinka. This is like an objective overview of the health of the project and kind of its subparts, meant to really ground us in some numbers rather than just our feelings. The third part is Hug Reports. This is the first of 2 round-robin sections. Hug Reports is a chance for us to say thank you to the folks in our community for doing some awesome work. And as I said, it's a round-robin, so I will start and we'll go through the folks in the note stock with mixing in the folks in the voice channel as well. So it's kind of like alphabetical by your username on Discord. And again, if you're just listening in and don't want me to call on you, just say you're lurking and I'll skip over you. The fourth part is status updates. Status updates is another round robin where we this time talk about what we've been working on in the past week and what we plan on working on in the coming week. This is a great way for us to share tips and tricks and get an idea of what everyone's working on and collaborate potentially as well. Lastly, we have the fifth part, which is In the Weeds. In the Weeds is kind of a free-for-all. If you have questions or topics or discussions that we need to have, this is the place to do it. It happens at the end, so we can go as deep and long as we need to get something sorted out. If you have a topic for In the Weeds, please open up the note stock and add it to the list at the bottom of the doc under the In the Weeds section. Make sure to put your username, and basically what we'll do is we'll just go down through that list. I'll call on folks, and then you can introduce the topic that you wanted to talk about. We'll do that as long as we need. And with that, let me switch over to community news. I'll take a time code here first. First, in the community news section, this is kind of a preview of the CircuitPython newsletter that goes out every Tuesday morning. And I'll talk about that a little bit at the end. But first and foremost, the LinuxConf Australia 2021 online keynote. titled "The Story Behind Blinka" by Lamore Freed, was posted yesterday. So check that out on YouTube. Um, it says Lamore Freed, founder of Adafruit, gave a keynote talk on the story behind Blinka, discussing CircuitPython at LinuxConf Australia 2021. And the video is now available. I'm going to watch that later. I'm very excited. Next up, for those of you who are curious of what the Raspberry Pi RP2040 chip looks like inside, somebody just posted die shots of it. Die shots are like microscope pictures that have been taken after certain layers of the chip have been removed. It says there's an informative thread on Twitter, starting with x-rays of the new Raspberry Pi Pico board and subsequently going layer by layer through the board's RP2040 chip. The die shots are both beautiful and informative in understanding this new chip. The thread indicates the chip is made in the 40 nanometer process at the TSMC fab, which TSMC is used by a lot of folks. So if you're ever curious how a chip is actually structured, that's a really good place to start. Next up, we have over 27,000 accounts on Discord now on the Adafruit Discord server. The Adafruit Discord community, where we do all our CircuitPython development in the open, reached over 27,000 humans. Thank you. Adafruit believes Discord offers a unique way for CircuitPython folks to connect. Join today by going to the URL adafru.it/discord. Next. Pip updates. Pip is the package installer for Python. Pip installs packages from the Python package index. A late January update introduced two important changes. Support for Python 2 has been removed, and also support for Python 3.5 has been removed as well. Check out the pip.pypa.io for news on that. And lastly, a reminder that the CircuitPython Weekly newsletter is a CircuitPython community-run newsletter emailed every Tuesday. The complete archives are available at adafruitdaily.com/category/CircuitPython. It highlights the latest Python on hardware-related news from around the web, including CircuitPython, Python, and MicroPython developments. To contribute your own news or projects, edit next week's news draft at the github.com/adafruit/CircuitPython-weekly-newsletter in the drafts folder there. You can submit a pull request with the changes. If that's a bit too daunting for you, please tag @Ann_engineer on Twitter or email annb@adafruit.com. That's ANNE _engineer and ANNEB@adafruit.com. And thanks to Ann for putting the newsletter together this week and every week. Okay, next up. State of CircuitPython libraries in Blinka. This is a chance for us to take an objective view of the health of CircuitPython broadly. So I will start overall, and then we'll go into the individual pieces. So overall, we had 48 pull requests merged from 29 different authors. So thank you to all of our authors. It's awesome to see so many folks involved. I'll just skim here and see if the names I don't recognize are MW46D, R. Pavlik, Rodrigo Argumedo, Luxar, Adam Leishon, RS Bone, Luminous Owl, K Schmelzer, might have been last week, K Schmelzer, J Forsean, Blue Squall, Imgrant, Netroy, Xorbit. So thank you all to those new authors that I don't recognize. We had 12 reviewers, so thank you to all 12 of those reviewers for making those pull requests happen. As always, we're looking for reviewers because the more reviewers we have, the more pull requests we can review. So if you want to get started and help reviewing, let us know. We'd love to help you get going doing reviews. Last up, issue-wise overalls, we had 29 closed issues by 12 people and 31 open by 24 people. So we're seeing a lot of activity. We're net one more open, but that's okay. We're definitely in the ballpark, so we're keeping up, and so keep that up, everyone. That's awesome news. All right, I think I'm cruising. For the core, we had 7 pull requests merged from 5 different authors. Netroy and Xorbit are new in that group. And we had 4 reviewers, so thank you to our reviewers. We currently have, as when these stats were pulled, 17 open pull requests. And it does look like a bulk of those, let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 that are less than 10 days old. So we're kind of about half and half. We should definitely take a look at those older PRs and make sure that that they're being progressed. And if they're not, we can either close them or we can merge them if they're ready. Issue-wise, we had 5 closed issues by 3 people and 11 open by 10 people for 396 open issues. We do tend to be growing a little bit on our issues on the core. The way that we keep track of whether we need to look at them is with milestones. We have, let's see, 3 issues not assigned a milestone. So again, we're pretty good. And we have a number of long-term, a lot of those are either long-term or support issues. So I think generally we're doing pretty good. We have our next stable release will be 620, and we have 8 open issues with that milestone right now. So we'll have to take a look at that. And overall, we're making good progress. We've gotten an influx of folks with the Pico launch, the RP2040 board from Raspberry Pi. So we were finding issues with that, and we're trying to rapidly add more features. And then the ESP32S2 is also being worked on still because that is still very much a popular board. So 6.2 looks to be really good. It's not imminent. We're still doing betas, but that should be a pretty solid release. And with that, let's kick it over to Kattni for libraries.
Thanks, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
So this is all of the Adafruit CircuitPython libraries, plus a few extras. So all the libraries that begin with Adafruit _CircuitPython_, as well as the community bundle, and I think a couple other things as well sometimes pop up in this particular set of statistics. So we had 37 pull requests merged, which is excellent, especially because we did not do a CI sweep. So this is actually active other contribution type pull requests from 21 authors, which is amazing. I see most of the names that you read off earlier. So thank you to all of our new contributors as well. And 10 reviewers. In terms of the merged pull request, the oldest one was 22 days old, and the newest one was 0 or 1 days old. So it's good that we're keeping up because there's a lot of these that were only open for 0 or 1 days. And then a few of them that we're picking up that are older, which is good that we're keeping up with that, leaving us with 47 open pull requests across all the libraries. We had 23 closed issues by 11 people and 17 opened by 16 people, leaving us with 279 open issues. If you're interested in contributing to CircuitPython on the Python side, consider going to circuitpython.org/contributing. You'll find all of this information and more. All the open pull requests, all of the open issues, and a list of library infrastructure issues, as well as how to contribute to translating the CircuitPython core. So you can search the issues list by label. So if you are interested, if you're new to everything and you're interested in contributing, a good first issue is a good thing to search for. We have 8 of those available at the moment. If you're looking for something more complicated, bug or enhancement is 2 labels that you might want to search for. We have a guide on contributing to CircuitPython with Git and GitHub, so don't let that intimidate you. And we are always available to answer questions on Discord. We want you to be able to contribute, so we want to make sure that we can do what we can to help you do that. So consider taking a look at that, and that's how you can contribute to CircuitPython on the Python side of things. In terms of library updates in the last 7 days, we had 2 new libraries, AW9523 and DateTime, and a number of updated libraries, which I will not read off, although I will say that we did have an update to Community Bundle, which is always great to see. And that's where we are with the libraries.
Awesome. Thank you, Kattni. All right, next up we will kick it over to Maker Melissa for an update on Blinka.
Hello, Blinka is our CircuitPython compatibility layer for Raspberry Pi and other single-board computers, and it also is supposed to work with MicroPython, though I haven't heard anyone actually using it. There are this last week we had 4 pull requests merged by 4 authors and 3 reviewers, which is quite good. There were 3 open pull requests remaining, and there were 1 closed issue by 1 person and 3 open by 3 people, leaving a net of 50 open issues. There were 1,243 PyPI downloads in the last week, and we are supporting 67 boards. And that's it.
Thank you, Melissa. All right, next up we have Hug Reports. Hug Reports is a chance for us all to say thank you to folks for the work they've been doing in the community. This is good for 2 reasons. One, it's great to just recognize what folks are doing and thank them for it. But also, by doing it publicly, we also reinforce to each other what we value as a community. So that's really good. Again, we do this as a round robin, so I will start and go down the list. If you are lurking, meaning you don't want to have anything to say, don't want to unmute, that's totally fine. Just let us know you're lurking. And also double check that in the notes doc it has you marked as lurking as well. That's what I'll go off of. If you do have something to say but you don't want to say it, you're welcome to put notes in the notes doc and I'll read those off on your behalf. And that is true even if you're unable to make the meeting as well. So if you're listening to this after the fact and would like to do some Hug Reports, we're not leaving you out. Just check the pinned messages in the CircuitPython channel for the notes doc for the next week and feel free to drop them there. And we'll read those off. Okay, so I will start, and then we'll go down the list. So first and foremost, I wanted to say a huge hug report to DCD, David, for taking notes and time codes during my streams. These last 2 have been particularly busy with all the RP 2040 chatter, so having the notes that DCD's been taking has been really helpful. Second, hug report to Kilogram, who is Graham from the Raspberry Pi, for emailing me some tips about the RP 2040 after watching my stream. So it's cool to see that. Hug report to Mark Gambler and Dave P for helping with the RP 2040. And I should say microdev as well in that list. And then finally, hug report to Lady Ada and Katie Bell for their Linux Conf Australia talks. Dan just got Katie on my radar, so thanks to Dan as well. Katie is doing some exploratory code editor design, which is really, really cool, and a lot of what I was thinking about with the Glider app stuff. So I encourage everybody to, I'll post this link, to watch this. I watched it last night. It's very, very intriguing, and Katie's doing a lot of thinking on that, so it's really awesome. And with that, let's go to TG Techie.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So I have 4 hugs. First is for Kenny for taking time out of her week to discuss documentation. It was incredibly helpful and just very fun in general. And the docs for that should be up soon. To Foamy Guy for sending some streaming tips for live streaming. I wasn't able to implement all of them, but they're very appreciated. To Mango, who helped run the live stream, doing OBS magic, or whatever the dark secrets one has to use for that. And to anyone who tuned into my live stream this week, for putting up with the poor audio and visual quality. I promise the next one will be better.
Awesome. Thank you, TG Techie, and congrats on starting the stream.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have notes from Brent. Brent says, a hug report to Maker Melissa for testing the ESP32S2 Mini MQTT. Hug report to Hierophect for the ESP32S2 socket fixes. And a hug report to Stargirl for an awesome embedded.fm interview. Learned a lot about synths, I believe is what Brent meant. And definitely check that out if you haven't listened to that embedded FM. I recommend it as well. Next up, we have a group hug from Charles Burniford, and we'll go to Dan.
I just want to give a group hug, selective group hug, I guess. Everybody who's trying out the betas and testing things that has changed, Jerry in particular, and many other people who've tried ERP 2040 port and have filed issues or brought things up in Discord. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, next up we have notes from David Gloud, who says, hug report to Kattni for the code for the Pico guide, and hug report to myself, Tan Newt, for the Pico stream and development. And next up we have Foamy Guy.
Alrighty. This week, a couple hugs to Paint Your Dragon and Jeff for working on RGB matrices inside the Protomatter library to be able to chain those vertically and up to 4. That's some really neat stuff going on there. So really appreciate both of their work on that. To GitHub user Podesta 202020 has done some reviews on a couple of my PRs the last few weeks. To Niradoc for always has been given a bunch of great help in Discord. I've seen them in the help with channel for a while now, and just joined the CircuitPython helpers. So a hug there. And a couple more to TG Techie for the interesting stream over the weekend on their GUI framework. I enjoyed that. And then lastly to Kmatch. Kmatch 98 wrote really nice proposals out for the new layouts library and some really sweet graphics to go along with it that illustrate really well how some of the different mechanics inside their work. So huge thanks there.
Awesome. Thank you, Foamy Guy. All right, next up is Higher Effect.
This past week, thanks a bunch to Anecdata and Jerry Nito for helping to identify some problems in Socket. Thank you to Dan for helping to identify a weird little hash issue that we were encountering inside Socket and requests. And thanks to you, Scott, for reviewing the SSL Socket PR.
Mm-hmm. And I have to do that again.
Yes.
It's on my radar. All right, and I'll read off Jeff's notes, who says group hug and hug report to Ask Patrick W for big circup improvements. Yeah, totally. All right, next up is Jerry.
Hello. Thanks to Ashton Leighton for PR put in to add the signal noise ratio to the RFM9X. Scott for helping everybody, including me, getting started with PIO on the RP40. And to Bindi5 for a bunch of new updates to the NRF 2401 library. And everybody who's done such a good job on documenting display IO. Working my way through it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jerry. All right, next up we have Kattni.
All right, I have a bunch of hugs today. So I have one for TG Techie for a lovely conversation about documentation, projects, and more. To Foamy Guy for getting a PR into the new Display IO layout library and replying on the suggestions issue I filed. To Neradoc for joining the CircuitPython helpers on Discord. They were already super helpful and made a great candidate. And when I proposed it to them, they accepted. So they joined today. To Jeff Epler for being my first sponsor on GitHub. To Scott, Thea, Mr. Certainly, and Crayola for sponsoring me on GitHub. And my friend Craig and Crayola for helping me with getting a website going using Pelican, which runs on Python, and theming it, which involves Jinja templates. The Python part makes a bit of sense, but the Jinja templates were pretty much brand new to me. So thank you so much for their help there.
Awesome. Thank you, Kattni, and congrats on all those sponsors. All right, next up, we have text from Kevin Thomas. Kevin says, hug report to Foamy Guy for taking the time to make a detailed video to create stubs for CircuitPython within the Power PyCharm editor, and group hugs. And next up, we have Kmatch98.
Okay, thanks. First hug to Foamy Guy, TG Techie, Maker Melissa for feedback on the widget design, particularly class structure, which is my homework to understand this week. Second, Kattni and Foamy Guy for starting a new library called Display.io Layout, where some of these widgets may reside. Third, for David Glauda for his 2021 CircuitPython vision for the future and what it means for computing. And then finally, Jepler and Foamy Guy for some continued improvements on text labels. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, K-Match. And last up, we have Maker Melissa.
Hello. I wanted to give a hug to Foamy Guy, KMatch 98, and TG Techie for the great discussion on Common Control Interface, and Brent for your work on Mini MQGT and a group hug. That's it.
Thanks, Melissa. All right, next up we have status updates. We do this as a round robin as well. This time we want to hear a little bit about what you've been working on and what you plan on working on in the coming week. And again, if you don't have anything to say, feel free to just say you're lurking. If you have texts you'd like me to read off, feel free to drop those in the notes doc. And again, that's true even if you're unable to make the meeting. And with that, I will scroll down to myself and start. First thing I've got going on today is I'm upgrading my computer. Yay! I finally got a new CPU and I get to go pick it up today. So I will be updating this afternoon. So I'll probably be online via my laptop, but I don't plan on getting any code done today. Hopefully I'll get everything set up by the end of the day and be able to pick up on stuff tomorrow. What I'm doing right now is I'm working on audio code on the RP2040. I need to regroup on it a little bit and get it going. I wrote a lot of code, but that code is kind of like not tested or compiled yet. So I need to do that. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'm hoping to do both audio PWM and I2S outputs. A lot of that is shared in terms of like how to convert the buffers and how to get it out. And then let's see, I might do PDMN, we'll see. And then I also wanted to just say, for those of you who've been liking the RP2040, Graham, who works for Raspberry Pi, emailed me yesterday or this weekend just to point out that there is an interpolator on the RP2040, which is actually could be very useful for the sample conversion to the output formats. So if you're want to look at some neat things that the RP2040 can do, I suggest looking at the interpolator. I didn't quite keep track of where it was, but if you're looking for it, it's in the SIO peripheral. So in the datasheet, it's under the system description SIO section, which is pretty neat. You can basically set it up to say, like, when I give you a number, do this math, like this shift, this mask, and this addition all on it in a single cycle, which is pretty dang interesting. So yeah, I'm hoping to use that with the audio stuff that I'm doing. And I'm in audio land right now. Next up, let's kick it over to TG Techie.
If I remember correctly, you've mentioned wanting to upgrade your computer on a couple of streams. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. So last week, I guess I already mentioned it, but yesterday live streamed using the graphics framework I've been working on for years at this point, to make a little RGB color mixer. And it took about half the time I was expecting it to, which I guess is a good thing. In non-live stream stuff, I started on documentation for the library. Got a sort of glitchy app launcher working for my watch project at Run CircuitPython. Asked some questions that I think are better for down in the weeds. And that's most of what I did last week. Some small stuff like case revisions and chassis changes on the watch. Next week, I'd like to, by then, finish the first guide and docs, not everything, but the first textual version of docs. Make a PR to get started on converting the Display.io shaped library to a more RAM conservative rectangle widget or layer, I guess I should call it. Start on a universal CircuitPython driver for the graphical framework, because right now there's just one hard-coded for the watch and one hard-coded for the PyPortal. And I want to try out Kmatch 98's toggle widget, which looks really cool. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, TG Techie. And I think that first in the weeds is from you, so I just double check.
Oh, yes, it is. Too. Sorry.
No worries.
All
right, next up, I have notes from Brent. Brent says the CircuitPython datetime library is released. It is a subset of the CPython datetime library. For those of you who don't know, this is really makes it a whole lot easier to do computations between dates and stuff. So if you're doing that, check it out. The time stuff that was in CircuitPython already is like super limited. Brent also updated Mini MQTT for the ESP32 SPI and ESP32S to CPython and CPython compatibility, releasing it this week. He is back to school, which means less time to work on CircuitPython, but I'll be around and helping in any capacity I can. And with that, let's go to Dan.
Okay, I think it was on Wednesday, I released 6.2.0 beta.1, only 5 days after beta.0. We're still having lots of stuff coming through, so we'll probably have another beta quite soon with more fixes of various kinds, fixes and additions. And there's been a lot of reviewing and troubleshooting to do on Discord and in GitHub, so I've been doing a lot of that. New issues come up, and then we have to fix them. As Lucian mentioned, there was this really confusing bug having to do with objects kind of disappearing out from under you or something in the sockets library, and we figured out that it had to do with hashes not being immutable, which they have to be. So that's going to get fixed. And meanwhile, I've been starting to work on the secondary CDC channel implementation, which will be a byte stream oriented thing that you can talk to over. It'll be in addition to the REPL, and so it doesn't interfere with the REPL. So you can have a program on a host computer exchange data with the board, and it'll have a channel exclusively dedicated to that, like using USB to serial converter or something like that. So I'm working on that. Okay.
Yeah, so for folks who don't know, the CDC is the term that's used on USB side, but it's basically a serial line. So it's just like, think of it as a UART, but over USB. CDC is like the particular protocol that is spoken over the USB connection.
Yeah, it's actually ridiculously complicated for what it is.
Yeah, it has like origins and like modems, I think.
Right, modems, and there are other CDCs that could be like any other kind of serial communication.
Yeah.
So it's very odd.
Yeah, it's weird. But yeah, it's basically a UART. Okay, next up we have notes from David Cloud, who says, for PIO Pico RP2040, killing my first Pico, either DOA or it's my soldering. Testing traditional NeoPixel and PIO NeoPixel in the Pico. And also trying to implement Blink or similar in PIO. Note that NeoPixel write on the Pico is implemented with the PIO, so if you're comparing the two, you might not see a lot of difference. Non-CircuitPython related, David's been playing a lot of Shenzhen IO, which is a game I mentioned on my stream because it involves programming very basic microcontroller-y sorts of things. All right, next up we have Foamy Guy.
All right, thanks, Scott. Last week, I moved in a couple of enhancements that Jeff made into the display text library. One was using the ascent and descent, configuration properties from inside the fonts, using those for the bitmap label specifically. And then the other one was bringing in a function that wraps text onto multiple lines, but this one is based on the number of pixels instead of the number of characters, which is really nice. I created the kind of like cookie cutter initial code and got the initial layout, the grid layout, put into the layouts library last week. And then I also made a video that covers the process of making the stubs and then how to import them into PyCharm, at least until we can hopefully figure out how to package them. which I still intend to try to figure out some more. Haven't done yet. This next week, I would like to finish up some code and get a PR ready for a new label, a statically sized label. So you'll give it a size and then it will stay at that size and try to contain the text that you give it, unlike the current one, which you kind of like give it text and it grows to fit. And this will be really nice because that new wrapping function is going to help it out, and it will fit together with the grid layout that is in the layouts library to help you make really neat layouts without having to work very hard, hopefully. And then lastly, I need to follow up and see the feedback and then make whatever changes are there for the initial code that is in that layouts library. I saw there's, I think Katni or somebody reviewed that. So I'm going to check that out this week to push that along as well. And that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Foamy Guy. Okay, next up is Hierophect.
Alrighty, this past week, I dug into some problems with the requests library, or rather the connection between the request library and the socket module, which turned out to be all over the place. There were like 4 different overlapping issues that were all different. So it took a little while to ease them all out, but we got them. Thanks again, Dan, for helping me pin down the hash-related issue, which I didn't know what the heck that was, because I'm a little bit less experienced on the Python end still. But I also fixed out a issue in socket related to timeouts, and we pushed that up in terms of it's been merged already as opposed to the SSL socket, which is still in the review process. I got set up for low power. I got my new Monsoon power monitor, which should help out with fixing some older stuff with ESP32 and any other low power issues. And I got to try out the software for that, and so that's all set up. And I fixed some ongoing issues with the SSL socket PR, which is still in the review stages and has needed a little bit of upkeep every step of the way as it gets interrupted by merges and that kind of thing. This week, I'll be taking a break from socket, finally, to fix an old STM32 I2C issue, which has been on my to-do list for much too long for how serious of an issue it is. And I'll be checking out just checking out the low power issues list, seeing if there's anything that I can help out on now that I have my equipment set up. I might go back and revisit a couple of socket functions anyway, just because they're low hanging fruit, like getFD, and maybe get socket address or something like that. And then I'm gonna, in my personal time, I'm going to be checking out some ESP32 now stuff because I need it for one of the things I'm working on. And hopefully I will get some info on a potential future CircuitPython implementation of that. And that's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Hierophect. Really nice job on all that socket stuff. I read through it yesterday and I was impressed.
Thanks, guy. I appreciate it.
All right. Next up, we have notes from Hugo, who says, this week I'm having a go at making a vertical progress bar. I've started working on breaking changes for the Adafruit CircuitPython progress bar to allow for both horizontal and vertical progress bars from the same class. Open to suggestions whether it should be a major version update or a new /separate library. Part of the changes will include an example for the matrix portal for both the current version as well as the new one. I would say you're on the right track. Either a major version update or a new library would be totally fine. Next up, we have notes from Jeff, who's out this week. Jeff said, last week upgraded Protomatter. Now you can tile your screens. Responded to a number of issues in Adafruit CircuitPython SD and made my first pull request, I think, to Adafruit Blinka. This week, taking the week off. Fun stuff. Made my first circuit sculpture. All right, and next up is Jerry.
Hi. Let's see. Okay, so where'd it go? So I've been playing around with the RP20 Eco and trying to learn some things about PIO and just realizing how much I've got to learn, but it's all fun. And I made up my mind that I'm finally going to learn how to use this. I've put it off far too long. So I've been working through the guides and really impressed with the guides and actually finding that it actually can make it do things. So like a long overdue skill. And then just today, actually a little while ago, native bus device again. So I'll bring that up in the weeds if that's probably a better place for it.
Sure. What's the one sentence summary of it?
It looks like it breaks I2C for if the long int is not enabled.
Right. Okay. Well, we can talk about that in a bit.
Okay.
Thanks for finding that. All right. Next up, we have Kattni.
All right. As a side note, Hugo, I think it should live in that library. You may want to consider making like a base class and then having the other two inherit from it, and basically have a package structure in the library instead of a single file, would be my suggestion. But PR early and often, and we can discuss it in the PR. So last week, I updated the MPR 121 guide for the Qt revision. I added better instructions to the Getting Started with Pico and CircuitPython guide for how to get into the bootloader, because one of our own was having issues with it. So I tested, and you can just continue to hold down the button until the bootloader appears. So I updated the instructions to suggest that instead of just pressing it. I added the code files for the Getting Started with CircuitPython, Getting Started with Pico on CircuitPython guide has a bunch of other content that we are still working on. So I uploaded all the code for that content to the learning guide repo on GitHub. I created the Adafruit CircuitPython display.io layout library, verified and merged a Circuit Playground PR that someone put in to add the ability to configure tap. Tap can be super finicky, so it made a lot of sense. And it didn't, it still fits with Circuit Playground Express on all the languages, so it's fine. Cleaned out some deprecated code from the Circuit Playground library that was still in there from CircuitPython 5x, I think, or maybe even 4x, I don't remember. But that's gone. And started the SpyFlash SD card guide. We have a new board out that is, it's SpyFlash, but it's actually an SD card. It's super nifty, works with the SD card libraries. So you just wire it up on SPI and then use the SD card library with it. This morning, I embedded all the code files from the Learn repo into the Getting Started with Pico guide, tested the rest of the code from the guide, everything works, and added Neradoc on Discord to the CircuitPython helpers role, which is excellent. This week, finish up the SpyFlash SD card guide. Basically, it's going to have wiring diagrams for CircuitPython and Arduino, and then link to the SD card guides for each. There's not going to be a whole lot of information in that guide because we already wrote guides that cover it. I'm going to be updating the Welcome to CircuitPython guide with two things that I added to the Getting Started with Pico guide, which is one about the CircuitPython file system use, and two, what happens when your code is done. What does CircuitPython do when your code is done running? They're two concepts that we covered in the Pico guide, and they really should be in the Welcome guide as well. So I'll be adding those. And then I'm going to add a page to the CircuitPython Essentials guide on how to use board in terms of import board and then doing dir board to figure out what pins are available to you. And then also how to use help modules from the REPL to figure out what modules are available in CircuitPython. We have new boards coming out with different pin names. Then they're not all D12 and A2 and so on anymore. We've got GP 15 and whatever else. And so we're getting folks wondering, how do I know what's built into CircuitPython for this board? How do I know what's available? How do I know what pins are available? And we don't have a guide page for it, but we will soon. And then the SHT40 is a upcoming board, and I'm going to be starting the guide for that as well. On a personal note, my GitHub sponsorship profile is live. Scott linked that earlier. Thank you again to all my sponsors. And I spent the weekend spinning up a website using something called Pelican, which is essentially a site compiler that runs on Python. And I managed to figure out editing a theme, which is starting to look like something like what I want. It's been a lot of trial and error for me in terms of editing it, because it uses Jinja templates, which essentially look like HTML, but they've got a lot of extra templatey stuff in them. So it uses CSS and so on, and it's been decades since I used HTML or CSS. So I have a general idea of what's going on, but it's all very much different now. So hopefully I'll get that up, and I intend to start trying to post stuff on, documentation, community building, that sort of stuff. But first I actually need to get the site up. So working on that, and that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Thank you, Katney. All right, next up we have KMatch98.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Last week, I finished a PR for parallel bus on the ESP32S2, and that supports fast drawing to displays over a parallel connection, which is, I think, only used on the PyPortal right now, but it's a fast way of drawing stuff on the screen. I started a first widget to try and understand what are the common features of that. So it's a sliding switch that you can at least see in the show and tell. I showed a demo of that. But really it was guiding me towards what are the standard parameters for widgets. And so I proposed a list there, and that's in the display.io_layout library. There's an issue located there. Next is to figure out how to better classify my first widget. Basically drew it as, or wrote it as one big chunk of code, but how best to fit it in something that's more manageable and reusable code with a few new classes that some of the folks proposed. And then last fun stuff, I made a slice form paper torus, which is basically kind of like origami, but a little, not folding, but just installing things, or cutting and installing. And didn't realize it was a level 5 difficulty out of 5 until I got into it. But if anybody's interested to learn your Zen and patience, that might be one thing you might want to try out. I'll post a link here.
Awesome.
And that's it.
Thanks, KMatch98. All right, next up we have Maker Melissa.
Hello. This last week I wrote a guide on using CircuitPython and Home Assistant through the MQTT library. I converted a couple more of the shell scripts over to Python. I added some deinit code to the external Bang.io library, and I tested some other pull requests. This week I'm going to catch up on some GitHub issues, such as the Matrix portal update with the new Serpentine stuff. Test out ESP Home with the ESP32S2, and hopefully I can get to some Blinka display.io soon. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. Next up, we have notes from Mark, who says, wrong place. Somebody else's cursor's there. Mark is working on adding display.io.parallelbus support to the RP2040, waiting on a display to arrive Tuesday to test it. And that's it. Thank you, everybody, for doing status updates. Next up, we have In the Weeds. In the Weeds is a section where we take a time code first, and then we talk. In the Weeds is a section where we have more free-form discussion about anything that's come up that we want to have a longer discussion about. So if you have topics, we do have a couple listed already, so there's a chance time for you to add them to the doc there. If you are unable to make the meeting and do have topics you'd like to hear discussed, this is a good place to do it. So with that, let me take a time code and I'll hand it over to TG Techie for the first topic.
Okay. So this is maybe a thing that should turn into a PR, but I figured I'd bring it up. I noticed that, okay, so for the Watch project, I'm very limited on RAM, so when trying to switch between apps, you have to take whatever you were previously working on and take it out of memory. And in Python, it's hard to, but you can do it. However, I was noticing not all of the app memories being free, and I think that's because the compiled version of the source code for the files that are imported are not being freed when the object that represents the module is. I was curious if that is intentional or just because it's not an expected use case and there's no mechanism for freeing compiled files, or if it's a bug.
So I don't think it's the compiled bytecode. I suspect that is actually being freed, because functions as they're imported are saved as separate things. Generally, unloading modules is not something we support. My guess as to why it's not freeing everything is actually the strings. So all of the names of all of the variables in your functions, for example, will be interned, quote unquote, interned into the QString tables. Basically, they get saved into some separate tables, and then they're referenced based on the index into that table. And that's, I suspect, is not, that's the bit that's not being freed, is like the growth of the QString tables that are caused by an import. What I would say is you should really look at, there's a pending PR that needs to be somebody needs to pick it up and finish it, that Christian started, that allows you to just say like, next time run this file and restart. And I think that's a much better way to switch between apps, because that means the apps will start independently of one another. I don't know the PR number off the top of my head, but that's really, I think, the direction that you want to go.
Do you have a keyword or two or milestone besides enhancement?
I mean, look at pull requests. It's
Okay.
3454. Let me copy the link. Like, this is really, I think, what you need. And Christian was working on it for the Radimir's handheld game thingy micro game. So like, it's a way, it was designed to be able to like switch different games in a gaming handheld.
Sure.
So I think it's doing, pretty much what you want as well. And the way that Christian set it up is like, you can set like, oh, if this file errors, do run this other thing next, or like have different behavior based on like how it exits, which I think could be handy.
Thank you. I'll take a look.
Christian also has a pending PR that saves the exception output. So if an exception does happen, it will actually save the string of the traceback, so that like the next thing that runs can actually like do something with it, which is probably handy too.
Another orthogonal thing that could be possibilities that you know about sleep memory, which is an area of RAM that's preserved across resets, across sleeps. And so if there were something like that for not even with respect to sleeping, if there was just some persistent storage that what didn't get lost after a reset, then and that wasn't flash because you'd burn it out, then that could also be used to change state. So that's another possibility. But I think which .py to run is sort of a more straightforward way. But the other way could also be a way of remembering some state across resets.
Right. So you would say, oh, like, here's what I want to do next, and then reset the VM, and then the first thing you do next is you read that to see if you're doing something else.
One last question.
Mm-hmm.
So the names of things are passed by indexes. Does that mean the compiled files don't have those indexes ahead of time?
Right. Or the MPY files, they have the string and they have an index, but when they're imported, the indexes get changed to like the global index. Yeah, there's no
patching the
The bytecode.
pre-assembled on the end. Oh, patching the bytecode?
I think so.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay.
Yeah, so the reason that there's all this mechanics about QString, and the goal is to only import a string once, or only keep one copy of a string. And then what you can do is, because it's not a pointer, it means that you can actually point it, or you can actually store it in a pointer. Which means that, like, if you have a QString in a dictionary, you don't actually need a separate object. It says I'm QString such and such, and then it can look it up.
Oh, that is neat.
Yeah, if you want, the pointer packing stuff is really bizarre. Like, MicroPython does it for small numbers as well. So, like, if your number is like less than 30 bits, it will just it abuses the pointer to save it in the pointer value itself. Which
that's really neat.
Generally works pretty well, but it's kind of confusing sometimes.
Okay.
Is that it? Did you get?
That's it for me.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to Jerry.
Okay, so this is a good example of stumbling across something because a question came up in Discord. Somebody asked a question about hollowing and trying to do something with it, so I dug mine out and decided to update it and answer the question. It had to do with rebooting it, his reset button, it turns out. But while I had it, I figured, oh, gee, I'll try some of the basic stuff on it after I updated it, make sure it worked. And lo and behold, I went to just read the onboard accelerometer, the list3dh, and it gave me an error which said small int overflow when it was trying to instantiate the I2C bus. It it hadn't even gotten into the code. It just failed when it tried to initialize the bus. So I thought about it a little bit and reported it as an error in the list or an issue in the list library. And then actually Lady Ada suggested digging into it a little bit. So I dug a little more and tried it on a CutiePy. It worked fine. So I sort of then thought, well, gee, maybe it has something to do with the fact that the long integer, that's the one difference, is the long integers are disabled in the in that library. So first thing I tried was building it with the long integers enabled. And that worked, but it ran out of flash, so I had to take something else out.
Right.
So I thought, oh, at least I'm onto something here. And then I thought, well, why is that new? And I looked around, and the long integer stuff was done about 6 months ago. But then it sort of thought, oh, something that's been done more recently is to switch over a native bus device. So I decided to just try taking that out, and lo and behold, the problem went away. So, and then I've started looking into the bus device code, but I'm not that familiar with it. But there is some stuff in there that's potentially using some 64-bit integers to pass the result of the bus device back. So maybe that's a new change that wasn't done in the library.
Right.
I am actually here now. There is a few cases where it calls MP object new int from ULL.
Yep.
And I wonder if something with that doesn't work.
Yeah, I imagine if the number's larger than 30 bits, then it would throw this exception.
I haven't looked at the long int support though, so I'm not quite sure how it might affect it. I can try disabling it from my build, and I should probably be able to see where it's crashing.
Okay. Yeah. So I assume this will affect any of the boards that don't have the long int enabled, but I only tried it on the Halloween.
The older Halloween?
Which one? The M0 Halloween
okay.
has that explicitly turned off, and so do a lot of the small boards.
Right.
But
yeah, I can poke at that. It shouldn't be too hard to disable them.
What's that?
I was just going to say it shouldn't be too hard for me just to make a build with it disabled and test it.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, why are we getting a number that's higher than that?
Yeah. Probably because I just used the convert or make an object from a long, because it was just taking whatever input from the Python level. In other words, it's probably me not knowing better.
Okay. I wonder if the make the object function is smart enough to be like, is the number low enough that I could actually do it, or it's just blanket, like if you call this when this is off, then it throws this regardless.
Yeah, that's what I'm suspecting.
Yeah. So if you do want to try to debug this with a debugger, the approach that I would take is find where this exception's thrown and just put an ASM breakpoint in it. Although I don't think that works with ASM breakpoint doesn't work with SAMD 21s. I think that's a Cortex M4 thing. You could also...
I can also just try hard coding a device address in, and so instead of using the convert, I can just I got an idea.
Yeah, there's also MP obj new small int or something if you know that the number is lower.
Yeah, and for a device address, I might be able to just convert it to that because those can only be 1 byte. Yeah, the max number you're gonna get on I2C is there's actually like a 10-bit addressing mode as well, as 7, but I think we only ever use the 7-bit addressing. So yeah, that sounds good. I don't think it'll be that difficult to. I'm staring at the function I think is doing it right now, so.
All right.
I'll just need time later to look at it.
Well, sorry about that. Thanks, though.
No, that's my fault.
Mark, I'll assign it to you, and if you don't have time to look this week, let me know and we'll do that. I think this would be good to just get in the next beta.
Yeah, I should have time in the next couple nights.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to impose
so.
on you, but
no, totally got it.
Just let me know if you don't have the cycles, and we'll pick it up.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, thank you for doing that. The other thing I'm aware of is the SD card library doesn't work with the native SPI device because it doesn't have the .spy property, which SD card uses so that it can clock the card without setting the chip select high. And so I'm just going to add it. I should be able to just knock it out today. But basically just adding an accessor that lets you get the underlying SPI object back. All right. I'm excited to get that all checked in. I think people will like it. Okay, and that's been the CircuitPython Weekly for February 1st, 2021. Thank you all for taking the time out of your schedules to join this community and chat with us about what you're working on and all of the CircuitPython-y things. I just want to reiterate that a number of us, not everyone, but a number of us are supported by Adafruit to work on CircuitPython. Some of us full-time, so please support them by purchasing from the Adafruit shop at adafruit.com. This meeting has been recorded, so it will be posted shortly on YouTube at youtube.com/Adafruit. And then we strip the audio out of that and push it to podcast services as well. So check that out. We gave a preview of the contents of the Python for Microcontrollers newsletter. So if you want to subscribe to that, you can go to adafruitdaily.com. That goes out every Tuesday morning. The next meeting, I think, is... Let me double check my schedule. Next week's meeting is next week at the same time, Monday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. The week after, so 2 weeks from now, it will be different, so beware of that. So yeah, next week normal. The week after will be on Tuesday instead of Monday. This meeting is held on the Adafruit Discord server, which you can go join by going to the URL adafru.it/discord. If you want to participate, speak up. You'll need to be a CircuitPythonista, so ask us to add that role to you. And with that, thank you all. We'll see you in the Discords this week, and then we'll see you in the meeting next week. Have a great week, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a great week.
See you later, folks.